Have you ever wondered what it would be like to witness a miracle with your own eyes? Imagine standing at a wedding where the joy is palpable, but the wine has run out. The atmosphere starts to shift, and the host's embarrassment begins to overshadow the celebration. Just when it seems the party might come to an abrupt and awkward end, a man steps forward. His name is Jesus. In a moment that would forever be etched in the memories of everyone present, Jesus instructs the servants to fill large jars with water. Confusion washes over them, but they obey. Then, with a simple command, the impossible happens. The water is transformed into the finest wine anyone had ever tasted. The guests are astounded. The host is saved from disgrace, and the celebration reaches new heights. This was not just a miracle of provision, but a sign of something far greater. Jesus' first miracle is more than a story of turning water into wine. It's a profound testament to his power and compassion. It's a reminder that in our moments of need, Jesus can provide in ways we can't even begin to imagine. As we journey through these incredible stories of Jesus' miracles, each one will reveal deeper insights into his character and mission. So if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and join us as we uncover these remarkable events. Now imagine being there, witnessing this transformation. How would it change your perception of what's possible? The scene shifts to the town of Capernaum, where a nobleman's son lies gravely ill. Desperation drives the father to seek out Jesus, who is gaining a reputation for his extraordinary powers. The father finds Jesus and pleads with him to come and heal his dying son. The anguish in his voice is unmistakable, a plea that resonates with anyone who has ever feared for a loved one's life. But instead of rushing to the boy's side, Jesus does something unexpected. He tells the father, "Go, your son will live." It's a moment that demands faith beyond what is seen. The nobleman, despite his anxiety, believes Jesus' words. He sets off for home, his heart a tumultuous mix of hope and uncertainty. As he approaches his house, his servants meet him with astounding news. His son is recovering. When he inquires about the timing of the boy's turnaround, he discovers it coincided precisely with Jesus' declaration. This miraculous healing, accomplished from a distance, strengthens not only the nobleman's faith, but that of his entire household. This event reveals Jesus' authority over sickness and space, emphasizing that his power is not bound by physical presence. It's a miracle that speaks volumes about faith and trust, encouraging us to believe in his words even when we can't see immediate results. How does this reshape our understanding of faith and divine intervention? Picture now a bustling scene at the Pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, a place known for its healing waters. Here, amidst the crowd of afflicted people, lies a man who has been paralyzed for 38 long years. He's waited, hoping for a miracle that seems forever out of reach. Every time the waters stir, others step in before him, leaving him in despair. Jesus approaches this man with a simple yet profound question. Do you want to be made well? It's a question that cuts through the years of disappointment and resignation. The man explains his predicament, his inability to reach the pool in time. But Jesus, with a command that defies all expectations, tells him, "Rise, take up your mat and walk." In that instant, the man feels strength returning to his limbs. He stands, rolls up his mat, and walks for the first time in nearly 4 decades. The onlookers are stunned, witnessing a transformation that seemed impossible moments before. This miracle at Bethesda is not just a healing, but a powerful declaration of Jesus' ability to restore life and hope where there was none. Imagine the joy and the disbelief intertwined as this man steps into a new chapter of his life. This story challenges us to consider the areas in our lives where we might feel paralyzed by circumstances, waiting for a miracle that feels out of reach. Now let's move to the shores of the Sea of Galilee, where a massive crowd is gathered to hear Jesus teach. The day is drawing to a close and the people are hungry. There's a sense of urgency among the disciples as they realize they have no means to feed such a multitude. They find a boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but it seems insignificant in the face of such need. Jesus, however, takes this humble offering, gives thanks, and begins to distribute it. As he breaks the bread and the fish, something miraculous happens. The food multiplies not just to meet the needs of the crowd, but to exceed them. Everyone eats until they are satisfied, and the disciples gather 12 baskets full of leftovers. This miracle is a stunning display of divine provision and abundance, showing that in Jesus' hands, even the smallest gifts can achieve the unimaginable. Picture the amazement of the people, their hunger turned into satisfaction through a miracle that defies logic. It's a powerful reminder that Jesus sees our needs and can provide abundantly, often in ways we least expect. As we reflect on this, think about how this act of multiplication speaks to the potential of faith and the transformative power of giving, no matter how small it might seem. As evening falls and the Sea of Galilee grows dark, the disciples set out in a boat, leaving Jesus behind to pray on a mountainside. The wind begins to howl, and the waves grow fierce, battering the small vessel. The disciples, seasoned fishermen, are no strangers to storms, but this one fills them with fear. Struggling against the tumultuous sea, their anxiety mounts, and hope seems distant. In the midst of this chaos, they see a figure walking towards them on the water. Terrified, they think it's a ghost. But then they hear his familiar voice, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." It's Jesus, defying the very laws of nature, walking on the stormy sea as if it were solid ground. Peter, ever bold and impulsive, calls out, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus responds with a single word, "Come." Peter steps out of the boat and begins to walk on the water towards Jesus. For a moment he experiences the impossible, but then, noticing the wind and waves, his fear overtakes him, and he begins to sink. "Lord, save me," he cries. Immediately Jesus reaches out his hand, catches him, and gently rebukes, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" As they climb back into the boat, the wind dies down and the sea becomes calm. The disciples are left in awe, worshiping Jesus, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." This miracle is not just about Jesus' power over the elements, but a profound lesson on faith and trust. It's a call to look beyond the storms that rage around us and focus on the one who can walk on water, the one who reaches out to save us when we falter. Reflect on this moment, the fear, the courage, the doubt, and the rescue. It's a powerful narrative that invites us to trust in Jesus' presence and power, especially when the waves threaten to overwhelm us. How often do we, like Peter, start with bold faith but falter when we focus on the storm instead of the Savior? The scene shifts to a crowded house in Capernaum where Jesus is teaching. The place is packed with people, all eager to hear his words and witness his miracles. Suddenly, the roof above them begins to crumble. Dust and debris fall as a group of friends, driven by desperation and unwavering faith, lower a paralyzed man on a mat right in front of Jesus. The determination of these friends to help their companion is palpable, their faith in Jesus' power evident. Jesus looks at the paralyzed man and, seeing the faith of his friends, says something unexpected. "Son, your sins are forgiven." The room buzzes with murmurs. The religious leaders present are taken aback, silently questioning Jesus' authority to forgive sins. Perceiving their thoughts, Jesus addresses them directly. Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, "Get up, take your mat and walk"? To prove his authority, Jesus turns to the man and commands, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." In an astonishing display of power and compassion, the man immediately stands, picks up his mat, and walks out in full view of everyone. The crowd is left in awe, glorifying God and exclaiming, "We have never seen anything like this." This miracle goes beyond physical healing. It's a profound statement about Jesus' authority to forgive sins, addressing the deeper need of the human soul. The healing of the paralyzed man is a vivid demonstration that Jesus' mission is to restore not only the body, but also the spirit. This story challenges us to think about the areas in our lives where we need healing and forgiveness, and how faith can open the door to miraculous transformation. Consider the impact of this event, the astonishment of the crowd, the vindication of Jesus' authority, and the profound joy of the healed man and his friends. It's a powerful reminder that no barrier, physical, spiritual, or otherwise, can stand in the way of Jesus' redemptive power. Now picture a crowded street in a bustling town. A synagogue leader named Jairus pushes through the throng, his face etched with desperation. His daughter, his only child, is at death's door, and Jairus' heart is breaking. He falls at Jesus' feet, pleading, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Jesus agrees to go with him, but as they make their way through the pressing crowd, another story unfolds. A woman suffering for 12 long years from a debilitating bleeding condition has heard about Jesus. She has spent all she had on doctors, but instead of getting better, she's only grown worse. Her condition not only affects her health, but also renders her socially and religiously unclean. Desperate for a miracle, she thinks, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." With a mixture of fear and hope, she reaches out and touches the edge of Jesus' cloak. Instantly, she feels the bleeding stop, her body healed. Jesus, sensing that power has gone out from him, turns around and asks, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples are puzzled by his question, given the jostling crowd. But Jesus keeps looking around, knowing someone has experienced his healing power. Trembling, the woman steps forward, falls at his feet, and confesses the whole truth. Jesus, filled with compassion, says to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." The woman's faith and Jesus' power have transformed her life in an instant. While this miracle unfolds, messengers arrive with grim news for Jairus. "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" But Jesus, overhearing them, tells Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe." They continue to Jairus' house, where mourners are already wailing. Jesus enters, takes the child's hand, and says, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stands up and begins to walk around. The house erupts in astonishment and joy. This double miracle showcases Jesus' boundless compassion and power. It illustrates that faith, whether in the touch of his garment or his spoken word, can bring profound healing and even life from death. Reflect on the intertwined fates of the woman and Jairus' daughter, both restored by faith in the midst of their deepest despair. How does this story of intertwined miracles inspire us to hold on to faith, even when the situation seems hopeless? Imagine a busy marketplace, the sun high overhead, as a woman who has suffered for 12 years with a constant flow of blood moves quietly through the crowd. Her condition has left her physically weak, socially isolated, and ceremonially unclean. Every doctor's visit, every remedy has failed her, leaving her penniless and desperate. But today she has a glimmer of hope. She's heard of Jesus, of his miraculous healings, and believes that if she can just touch his cloak, she will be healed. Amidst the jostling throng, she reaches out, her fingers brushing the edge of his garment. Instantly, she feels a surge of healing power course through her body, and she knows she is cured. Relief and awe flood her senses, but her joy is mingled with fear. She hopes to slip away unnoticed, but Jesus stops, turning to the crowd and asking, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples, perplexed by his question amidst the pressing crowd, wonder why he would ask such a thing. Yet Jesus persists, looking around to see who had done it. Trembling, the woman steps forward, falls at his feet, and confesses the whole truth. Jesus looks at her with profound kindness and says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." This moment is more than just a physical healing. It is a restoration of her dignity, her status in society, and her spiritual wholeness. Jesus' address of her as daughter signifies acceptance and love, reaffirming her value in the eyes of God. This miracle within the crowd highlights not only Jesus' healing power, but also his deep compassion and personal care for each individual. It's a powerful reminder that faith can reach out and touch the divine, bringing healing and peace. Think about the courage it took for this woman to push through the barriers of her condition and society to touch Jesus. A man, unable to speak or hear, is brought to Jesus by friends who have heard of his miraculous works. Their eyes are filled with hope as they beg Jesus to lay his hands on the man. Jesus, always moved by compassion, takes the man aside, away from the crowd, to give him the personal attention he needs. Jesus puts his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spits and touches the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighs deeply and says, "Ephphatha," which means "be opened." Instantly, the man's ears are opened, His tongue is loosened, and he begins to speak clearly. The joy on his face is indescribable as he hears the sounds of the world for the first time and expresses himself freely. The people around are overwhelmed with amazement. They exclaim, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." This miracle not only restores the man's senses, but also reintegrates him into his community, allowing him to participate fully in life. The healing of the deaf and mute man demonstrates Jesus' power to open both physical and spiritual ears, enabling people to hear his message and speak of his wonders. It's a testament to the transformative power of Jesus' touch and the profound impact it has on an individual's life. In the streets of Jericho, a blind man named Bartimaeus sits by the roadside, begging. When he hears that Jesus of Nazareth is passing by, he begins to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd tries to silence him, but he cries out even louder, determined to seize this chance for healing. Jesus stops and says, "Call him." The crowd's attitude shifts as they encourage Bartimaeus. "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, Bartimaeus jumps to his feet and comes to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asks. "Rabbi, I want to see," Bartimaeus replies. "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately, Bartimaeus receives his sight and follows Jesus along the road. The once blind beggar is now a man filled with vision and purpose, transformed by his encounter with Jesus. This miracle highlights the power of persistent faith and the willingness to cry out to Jesus despite opposition. Bartimaeus' determination and Jesus' compassion result in a life-changing moment, illuminating the transformative power of divine intervention. In a remote region, Jesus encounters a man possessed by a legion of demons. This man lives among the tombs, and no one can restrain him, even with chains. Day and night he cries out and cuts himself with stones, tormented by the evil spirits within him. When he sees Jesus from a distance, he runs and falls on his knees in front of him, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had already commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Jesus asks, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replies, "for we are many." The demons beg Jesus repeatedly not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs is feeding on the nearby hillside, and the demons beg Jesus to send them into the pigs. He gives them permission, and the impure spirits come out and go into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushes down the steep bank into the lake and are drowned. The herdsmen, witnessing this, run off and report it in the town and countryside, and the people come to see what has happened. They find the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they are afraid. Those who had seen it describe what happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. This dramatic exorcism showcases Jesus' authority over the spiritual realm, demonstrating his power to bring liberation and restoration to even the most tormented souls. At Capernaum, tax collectors approach Peter and ask if Jesus pays the temple tax. Peter, unsure, goes to find Jesus. Before Peter can speak, Jesus addresses the situation, highlighting his knowledge of the events. Jesus asks Peter, "From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others?" "From others," Peter replies. "Then the children are exempt," Jesus says, "but so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4-drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." Peter does as instructed. He catches a fish, and upon opening its mouth, he finds the exact coin needed to pay the tax. This miracle underscores Jesus' divine provision and wisdom, providing for their needs in an unexpected way. As Jesus continues his journey, he enters a village where 10 men with leprosy stand at a distance, raising their voices, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." Their condition, which isolates them from society, is both physically and emotionally devastating. When Jesus sees them, he responds, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." As they go, they are cleansed of their leprosy. The transformation is immediate and miraculous, their diseased skin becoming healthy and whole. One of them, realizing he has been healed, returns, praising God in a loud voice. He throws himself at Jesus' feet and thanks him, and this man is a Samaritan. Jesus asks, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he says to the man, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." This miracle not only heals physically, but also highlights gratitude and faith, showing the deeper layers of wholeness Jesus brings. In the small village of Bethany, a deeply emotional scene unfolds. Lazarus, a dear friend of Jesus, has fallen seriously ill. Despite being informed of his condition, Jesus waits 2 days before traveling to Bethany. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. The atmosphere is heavy with mourning. Martha, Lazarus' sister, meets Jesus on the road. "Lord," she says, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus reassures her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha acknowledges this, speaking of the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus declares, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? Martha affirms her faith in him as the Messiah. Mary, the other sister, also meets Jesus, and her grief moves him deeply. Together they go to the tomb, where Jesus, overcome with emotion, weeps. He then asks for the stone to be removed. Martha hesitates, pointing out the stench of death after 4 days, but Jesus reminds her of the glory of God. With the stone rolled away, Jesus looks up and prays, thanking the Father for always hearing him. Then with a loud voice he commands, "Lazarus, come out." To everyone's astonishment, Lazarus emerges from the tomb, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus instructs them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." This miraculous event profoundly impacts those present, demonstrating Jesus' authority over life and death and reinforcing his identity as the resurrection and the life. Lazarus' return to life becomes a powerful testament to Jesus' divine power and foreshadows his own resurrection. In Capernaum, a Roman centurion approaches Jesus with an urgent request. His servant, whom he values highly, is paralyzed and in terrible suffering. The centurion's respect and concern for his servant are evident, and he believes that only Jesus can heal him. Jesus offers to come to the centurion's home to heal the servant, but the centurion responds with remarkable humility and faith. "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." Astonished by the centurion's faith, Jesus turns to the crowd following him and says, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." He then addresses the centurion, "Go, let it be done just as you believed it would." And at that moment the servant is healed. The faith of the centurion, a non-Jew and a Roman officer, highlights the inclusive nature of Jesus' ministry and the power of faith in his word. This miracle showcases Jesus' authority and the profound impact of unwavering belief, regardless of one's background or status. Once again, a large crowd gathers around Jesus, and the situation mirrors an earlier event. The people have been with him for 3 days, and there is nothing to eat. Jesus expresses his concern to the disciples, saying, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance." The disciples are puzzled, wondering how they could possibly feed such a large crowd in this remote place. Jesus asks, "How many loaves do you have?" 7, they reply, "and a few small fish." Jesus instructs the crowd to sit down on the ground. Taking the 7 loaves and the fish, he gives thanks, breaks them, and gives them to the disciples to distribute to the people. Everyone eats and is satisfied, and the disciples pick up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that are left over. About 4,000 men, besides women and children, are fed that day. This second miraculous feeding reinforces the abundance of Jesus' provision and his deep compassion for the needs of the people. Despite the disciples' initial doubts, Jesus once again demonstrates his ability to provide for a multitude, leaving an indelible impression of his care and power. On a Sabbath day, Jesus is teaching in one of the synagogues, and there is a woman present who has been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She is bent over and cannot straighten up at all. When Jesus sees her, he calls her forward and says, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." He places his hands on her, and immediately she straightens up and praises God. The synagogue leader, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, addresses the people. "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord responds, "You hypocrites! Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. The woman's healing on the Sabbath illustrates Jesus' mission to bring freedom and restoration, challenging the rigid interpretations of the law that neglect compassion and mercy. This act of healing underscores the priority of human need and divine grace over strict adherence to ritual. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with him up a high mountain. There, something extraordinary happens. Jesus is transfigured before them. His face shines like the sun, and his clothes become as white as the light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appear, talking with Jesus. Peter, overwhelmed by the vision, says, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he is still speaking, a bright cloud covers them, and a voice from the cloud says, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." The disciples fall face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus comes and touches them. "Get up," he says. "Don't be afraid." When they look up, they see no one except Jesus. As they come down the mountain, Jesus instructs them not to tell anyone what they have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. This moment of transfiguration reveals Jesus' divine glory and his fulfillment of the law and the prophets, represented by Moses and Elijah. It strengthens the disciples' understanding of who Jesus is and foreshadows his resurrection, reinforcing the divine endorsement of his mission. On the Sea of Galilee, a fierce storm suddenly engulfs the disciples' boat. The waves crash over the sides and the wind howls, threatening to capsize them. Despite being experienced fishermen, the disciples are terrified, fearing for their lives. Meanwhile, Jesus is in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. In their panic, they wake him and shout, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus gets up, rebukes the wind, and says to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Instantly, the wind dies down and the sea becomes completely calm. Turning to his disciples, he asks, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples are left in awe and fear, whispering to one another, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This miraculous calming of the storm demonstrates Jesus' sovereign power over nature, providing a profound lesson on faith and trust in his divine authority. The disciples' awe underscores the revelation of Jesus' true identity as the Lord of all creation. In the synagogue on another Sabbath, a man with a shriveled hand is present. The Pharisees and teachers of the law are watching Jesus closely, eager to see if he will heal on the Sabbath so they might find a reason to accuse him. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, says to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." The man rises and stands there, and Jesus addresses the assembly. "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?" The room is silent, the Pharisees unable to respond. Jesus looks around at them with anger and, deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, says to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretches it out, and his hand is completely restored. The Pharisees are furious and begin to discuss with each other what they might do to Jesus. This miracle highlights the priority of mercy and goodness over legalistic interpretations of the Sabbath. Jesus' actions demonstrate that the Sabbath is a day for doing good and bringing restoration, directly challenging the hard-heartedness of the religious leaders. The healing of the man's hand serves as a powerful testament to Jesus' authority and the compassionate nature of his ministry. Jesus is passing through Jericho when a wealthy tax collector named Zacchaeus hears of his arrival. Short in stature, Zacchaeus cannot see over the crowd, so he runs ahead and climbs a sycamore fig tree to get a better view. As Jesus approaches, he looks up and says, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Overjoyed, Zacchaeus quickly climbs down and welcomes Jesus gladly. The crowd, however, begins to mutter, criticizing Jesus for choosing to be a guest of a sinner. Inside his home, Zacchaeus stands and declares, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus responds, "Today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." This encounter with Zacchaeus illustrates Jesus' mission to transform lives, breaking through societal judgments and bringing redemption to those willing to repent and change. Zacchaeus' radical transformation and generosity signify the profound impact of Jesus' presence and message on even the most unlikely individuals. In the town of Nain, Jesus approaches the city gate just as a funeral procession is passing by. The only son of a widowed mother has died, and a large crowd from the town is with her, mourning her profound loss. When Jesus sees her, his heart goes out to her, and he says, "Don't cry." Then he goes up and touches the bier they are carrying him on, and the bearers stand still. Jesus says, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sits up and begins to talk, and Jesus gives him back to his mother. The crowd is filled with awe and praise God, exclaiming, "A great prophet has appeared among us, and God has come to help his people." News of this miracle spreads throughout Judea and the surrounding country. This miracle of raising the widow's son not only demonstrates Jesus' power over death, but also his deep compassion for those who are grieving. By restoring the young man to life, Jesus alleviates the widow's sorrow and restores her hope, showcasing the life-giving power of his ministry. Jesus travels to the region of Decapolis, where a deaf and mute man is brought to him by some people who beg Jesus to place his hand on the man. Taking him aside from the crowd, Jesus puts his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spits and touches the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, Jesus sighs deeply and says, "Ephphatha," which means "be opened." Immediately, the man's ears are opened, his tongue is loosened, and he begins to speak plainly. The people are overwhelmed with amazement and say, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." This miracle reveals Jesus' intimate and compassionate approach to healing, addressing both the physical and social barriers faced by the man. By restoring his hearing and speech, Jesus reintegrates him into the community, showcasing his power to heal and transform lives in a personal and profound way. Jesus is walking with his disciples when he becomes hungry and approaches a fig tree by the road. Finding nothing on it but leaves, he says to the tree, "May you never bear fruit again." Immediately the tree withers. The disciples are amazed at how quickly the fig tree has withered. Jesus uses this moment to teach them about faith. "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer." This act and the subsequent teaching underscore the power of faith and the importance of bearing spiritual fruit. The withering of the fig tree serves as a vivid illustration of the consequences of spiritual barrenness and the potential of faith-filled prayer. On another Sabbath, Jesus is dining at the house of a prominent Pharisee. A man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body, known as dropsy, is there before him. Jesus asks the Pharisees and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remain silent. Taking hold of the man, Jesus heals him and sends him on his way. Then he turns to them and says, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" They have nothing to say in response. This healing, performed in the midst of those who question his actions, highlights Jesus' commitment to mercy and the well-being of individuals over rigid interpretations of the law. His question exposes the inconsistency in their logic. emphasizing that acts of compassion and necessity should always take precedence. During the Passover meal, Jesus gathers with his disciples for what will become known as the Last Supper. Taking bread, he gives thanks and breaks it, giving it to his disciples and saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he takes a cup, gives thanks, and offers it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." As they eat and drink, Jesus institutes a new covenant, symbolizing his impending sacrifice on the cross. He tells them that one of them will betray him, creating a moment of tension and introspection among the disciples. Each one questions if they are the betrayer, showcasing their vulnerability and human frailty. This profound moment not only sets the stage for Jesus' ultimate act of love and redemption, but also establishes the practice of communion, a central rite in Christian worship that commemorates his sacrifice and unites believers in faith. As the story reaches its climax, Jesus faces his greatest trial. He is arrested, tried, and crucified, but this is not the end. On the third day, the tomb where he was laid is found empty. Jesus has risen from the dead, just as he said he would. His resurrection is witnessed by Mary Magdalene, Peter, and the other disciples. He appears to them, showing the scars on his hands and his side, proving that he has conquered death. Jesus' resurrection is the cornerstone of Christian faith, signifying victory over sin and death, and offering the promise of eternal life to all who believe. This miraculous event transforms the despair of his followers into joy and fuels the spread of the gospel throughout the world. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the incredible miracles of Jesus and his transformative journey. If you found this video inspiring, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might need a reminder of these powerful stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest videos exploring the depths of faith, hope, and the teachings of Jesus. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.